Refashioning is about taking old, unwanted pieces of clothing and giving them a new life. It's about pulling those shirts from the back of your closet that you never wear, or those $5 dresses hanging on the thrift store rack, and transforming them with a pair of scissors, a sewing machine, and an open mind. My name is Callie, and I'm on a mission to create the ultimate upcycled wardrobe, one project at a time. This is my refashion journey. Today's project is all about transforming my husband's old white button-down church shirt into something new, fresh, and feminine. So first thing, I try on the shirt, and I'm going to put a pin where the shoulder point should actually fall. So we're going to take these sleeves in so they hit the shoulder at the right spot. Then I'm just going to put a pin at the bottom of the shirt where I want the hem to end. And then lastly, I'm going to also put a pin underneath the arm where I want the armhole to end and the sides to come in. Now I'm just going to chop off that collar. I'm going to change the collar up a bit, so I'm just removing that fabric right away. Then using those pins I placed earlier on the shoulder point and under the sleeve, I'm just going to cut a new sleeve hole on both sides. Then I'm going to throw my shirt on the ground, lay it out flat, and I'm going to cut up from the bottom to where I pinned that pin under the arm. So I'm just removing those excess sides and then doing the same to the bottom, following again that pin I placed for the hem length I want. And now I'm going to work on the sleeves. So I'm just going to cut off that excess where the sleeve was previously attached to the shirt. And then I'm going to lay the sleeve out flat and cut across the bottom seam. So this is the seam under the arm. So I'm just going to open up that sleeve completely. And then I'm going to kind of guess how long I want it and cut off the ends. Now I'm just folding that collar in half, ironing it and pinning it flat. Then I'm picking up my sleeve piece. I fold it in half to find the point, and I line that point up with the shoulder seam. You want to lay it right sides together, and I'm just going to pin that sleeve all the way around the armhole, front and back, and then repeat on the other side. Now that I have those pinned in place, I'm just taking it over to the sewing machine, and I'm just going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance and sew up that collar, sew that down, and I'm also sewing those sleeves in place. And just the whole way making sure that my fabric is laying flat on both sides so that I'm not getting any puckers that I don't want. Now I take my shirt back to my flat surface and I'm just buttoning it up and then turning it inside out, and I'm just going to lay that flat on the ground and line up the sleeves and the side seams. Just get those nice and flat all lined up, and then I'm going to pin up the bottom of the arm to the armpit, and I usually put a diagonal pin there just to mark where the turn is, and then pin down the sides, and I will do that on both sides. Now I'm just sewing up those sides. I sew up the side seam all the way to the armpit, which is right here. And then I put the needle down, lift up the presser foot, and pivot. Turn to go down the arms. Next, I'm hemming my sleeves. So I'm just going to roll it twice, iron and pin. And I'm going to mark 2 spots on my sleeve with double pins to leave about a 2-inch opening when I sew this up. So when I'm sewing again, you see those double pins there, I'm going to sew around the entire sleeve, except for between those 2 sets of double pins, about a 2-inch opening where my elastic will go. So now I'm just taking a small piece of elastic and wrapping it around my arm where I want the sleeve to end, just to measure how big I want that. And I will cut 2 pieces of elastic that same length. Now I'm taking a safety pin and attaching it to one side of my elastic, and I'm just going to use that safety pin to push the elastic all the way through that casing at the bottom of the sleeve, just bunching up the fabric and pulling it through until I reach all the way around, and I have both ends of my elastic out. Now that I have both pieces of my elastic, I'm going to just sew those in place, sew them together. Now I stretch my sleeve so it lays flat, and I'm just closing up that casing, closing that opening with just a top stitch. Alright, I decided I wanted to add some ruffles to the front of my shirt, so I'm just laying out all the excess fabric I have left over from pieces I cut off from the sleeves and sides, and I'm just going to start cutting 2-inch wide strips of fabric. I'm just cutting a bunch, as many as I can get, just to make sure that I have enough for those ruffles. And now that I have a bunch of pieces, what I'm doing here is I'm just creating kind of a gradual drop off. So the top of the ruffle will start at 2 inches, but as it comes to the bottom, I want it to taper down to a point. So I'm just creating that and sewing pieces together as needed. Now I'm just taking my ruffle pieces and I am folding over each side just so that I have finished edges to work with. So I'll just pin those in place and then sew them down. Once I have those sewn down, I'm going to up my stitch length to the maximum length and do a basic basting stitch down one side of the ruffle. Then I'm going to pull one of the threads from one of the sides and start creating my ruffle just by pulling the thread and moving the fabric down so that it starts to gather. And I'm just continuing to work that ruffle down through the whole piece of fabric and just evening out the ruffle as I go. Now I'm going to put my shirt onto my dress form, button that up just so I get the proper idea of how it's fitting. And I'm going to take those ruffles I just made and start pinning them down the front of the shirt. Just pinning them, kind of playing with them until they look how I want and they're in the right place. And as I was playing with the ruffle, I decided that I wanted more ruffle towards the top and I wanted it to kind of taper off as it got towards the bottom. So the ruffle got a little less dramatic, a little less tight as I reached that bottom point. And now with my ruffles in place, I'm just taking my shirt to the sewing machine and sewing those ruffles down. I'm just sewing really close to the edge so that the ruffle can kind of flare out the maximum amount. And my last and least favorite step, I am just finishing up by hemming the shirt. So I'm just doing a double fold, ironing and pinning in place, and then sewing that hem down. Once I have my hem, I am all done. Now let's take a look at that final transformation.